That was hectic, dude.
Incredibly hectic.
Man, especially with texting Eric back and forth.
Oh, man. Trying to buy a house and podcast and
Man.
not spill your drink at the same time.
And I lost the house, spilled the drink, barely podcasting. So sometimes that's how life is, and you just got to recognize that.
God, you're so much better than me. I would have been in shambles.
I've got some fun notes.
I can't wait.
For yo. Wow, is it good to be back in the saddle?
God, I've been waiting for this for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should address the fact that not only did we read the first 3 parts of Well of Ascension, but we also read a full other book in between, kind of waiting for each other to catch up to different spots and to arrange a time to podcast.
Yeah, thank God my wife's on a bachelorette party right now. Gave me time to read an entire true crime thriller from Monday to today. It was a 3.5, but what are you going to do?
Well, it's something to do. It's a good palate cleanser, as you say.
A palate cleanser.
But today is going to be chock full of really good conversation.
I can't wait.
So I'm thinking, let's keep it really simple today. We're gonna review parts 1 through 3 of the Well of Ascension, the second book in the Mistborn series by Brando Sando, and we're gonna go one part at a time. Because I think Wes made the point that a lot of times we get so excited to talk about what we learned or what we want to hypothesize on that we jump around in a really chaotic way.
She dense, she thick.
And that's a really good point, is there was a lot of conflict that was covered so quickly in part 1. And then it was a slightly slower burn with part 2, and then some interesting resolution and plot, a little bit of plot twisting happening in part 3. So I'm thinking, let's dive in. I would like to start, so let's try to contain what we can.
Sure.
To part 1. And I can give you some prompts as well with some of my thoughts, but who was your favorite character, I guess, in part 1? Or how did you think about the way he picked up in this book versus where he left off in book 1?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I probably need to refresh myself. Part 1 starts
immediately.
Elend is king, and they find out that Straff is at the doors of Luthadel.
Within the first page.
Yeah. So, to say who my first favorite character in part 1 would be slightly tough, but I got to go with Sazed.
Yeah.
Sazed is off. He's teaching the rest of the dominances about what happened with the Lord Ruler, and he's kind of put himself, separated himself from what was, and he's doing his duties as a keeper. And so I would say that would be my answer.
Yeah. Sazed is continuing to be such an impressive character in this series. And I mean, he's for sure he has become my favorite character of the original clan. And was Tindwyl introduced in part 1? Do you have notes on the final chapter of part 1? I have a lot of notes on part 1, but I don't know if I've captured the final chapter.
I'm gonna have to go back.
Why did something happen?
I just want to remember where part 1 ends.
Okay, yeah. So part 1. So basically, part 1 was them just setting up a lot of the conflict at the beginning with.
Okay, I know where part 1 ends. I'd have to go through.
Part 2 is the convecticle, when Sazed goes to the convecticle with Marsh.
Yeah. So
that's basically where part 2 is. So part 1 is essentially just a lot of conflict building.
Yeah. And okay. So part 1, we're actually introduced to the Watcher, who we find out to be as Straff's Mistborn. And I'm very intrigued by Vin and the Watchers relationship, because they
Vin
battle.
and Zane.
Yes, and they are battling it out in the streets of Luthadel, and so I think that would be my honorable mention of favorite character, would be this Vin's kind of met her match type deal, where I do really like Zane and the dynamic that he brings to the entire thing.
I thought it was interesting that Sanderson chose to give him, he must have schizophrenia. He hears voices in his head. He hears God ostensibly, and it says God is telling him to kill basically everybody that he encounters except for Vin. Yeah. And Vin is supposed to save him, which I thought was interesting because she also is the heir of the survivor, the savior. Correct. So I thought it was kind of funny, he was Vin was the one person that was supposed to kind of he's pursuing her pretty relentlessly.
So who is your favorite character before I give another honorable mention?
Yeah, I would say I like Zane fine, but I wouldn't say he's my favorite. I liked I'm going to stick with Sazed. I think and that gets a little bit more into part 2 with when Sazed and Marsh are kind of exploring that convectical
on a journey.
Yeah, that I will say I encountered some kind of clunky writing from Sanderson in that.
Sure.
I liked everything, and we can give ratings and stuff in a minute, but remember when they're in that convectical? I think
that's part 2. We were jumping around here. So other honorable mention that I have is Oreseur. And I'm giving him an honorable mention because, like you, I'm jumping around. I like him a lot more in
I don't
parts
think
2
we
and
can
3.
be contained to a single
No,
point.
it's difficult.
I think we got to.
We might just have to jump into it. I also really like. I've really come to love Oreseur, who's the Kandra.
Yeah, how can't you? I mean, especially because it's in the form of a dog. It reminds me of those young adult books where you have a talking animal as a companion. Who better than a dog? And it does humanize the Kandra quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And it does make me, it makes you really kind of enjoy his presence. And almost, this is something he talks about in the annotations, is in the original Mistborn, he gives the Kandra a heavy Oreseur, a huge speaking part, and people loved Oreseur more than the main character. So he really had to dial it back.
Yeah, sure.
In this
very
this
complicated writing. Guy, and I love the aspect.
I guess we don't even know if he is a guy.
He's whatever. Yeah,
he's whatever he is.
He's whatever. Yeah.
He's not. He's,
I heard he's kind of anal.
Dog. Yeah, he's dog. He's woman, man.
Yeah, but I love how their relationship takes shape, and I think that Vin is going to learn how to leverage that contract better by getting a backbone. I don't think she has much of a backbone right now, but I think as she becomes more important, both in her own confidence, but also as the story goes, she's going to learn how to better leverage the Kandra that she has at her disposal.
I think so. I think one of the questions that I actually ask in here is the contract of a Kandra. It just is so interesting to me. I hope we learn, and I'm sure we will learn a lot more about the dynamic of this contract and why it can't be broken, and sort of how did Kandra even come to be? Why are they oppressed? You would think a Kandra could pretty easily defend itself.
Yeah,
it really kind of can't even die. I mean, the thing just can take a beating, and its neck can basically snap in half, and then it's still alive, and it can go eat something else and still live. So it seems interesting to me that they
do make the distinction that Kandra and Mistwraith are mutually exclusive. I mean, they're separate.
Yes,
but they're distant relatives.
Yeah, they called the Kandra. Yeah, they kind of predate the Mistwraith, it sounds like.
So this is giving me a flashback to when I accidentally read too far on that.
Then don't tell me if it's going to...
No, I know. But I know that it referenced a specific page in the Well of Ascension, and I think it is probably in part 4. Mm-hmm. But I think that's going to be a juicy little tidbit on the Kandra.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I really liked about... when she got the dog's body is when she just went in there and absolutely decked that dog. and just murdered it.
She's like, yeah, can I get a dog? He's like, yeah, I got a Yorkshire Terrier for you.
And she's like, no, I want what was it, a wolfhound?
A wolfhound.
And then I just imagine this enormous dog. Like, she picked the biggest, meanest
well,
dog.
He
in the
brings
kennel.
like a docile one, like a borderline husky, and she's like, nah,
Which
dog.
kind of makes sense. Like, she's a 4 foot something, tiny, you know. And then she just goes over, burns pewter, and just smashes it to death.
I want the wolf meets the Great Dane.
Could you imagine being that guy who's just... I imagine...
Dirty in the street, just running a street vendor of dogs.
Well, I kind of imagine, like, this guy, like, likes these dogs. Like, he's trying to give these dogs a home. Like, he sounds like a good dude, you know? In a time that's pretty desperate,
yeah.
he chooses to give people animals.
Yeah.
You know, the Lord Ruler just collapsed society's complete downfall.
Yeah, right.
Ashes everywhere. And yet you're trying to keep these animals alive and give them away. And then someone comes and kills it in
just
front of you.
Punches it in
He's been
face.
keeping it alive for who knows how long from all these trials of the Final Empire. I wish I could have seen the face on that guy.
One of the things that I do have
Vin
to
is
think
a
about
savage.
is that, you know, in fantasy, they don't... I should say this. In fantasy, they don't necessarily, unless they make it a point in when they're setting up the world or talking about the scene, they don't talk about like how dirty it is as much. You know, when I think about like the Industrial Revolution, when somebody talks about it, they talk about just how dirty and muddy and coal and just disgusting. They don't really talk about that so much in fantasy books, so much that when they talk about like riding horses, you're like, oh, like this is not like modern day. Like this must be just like a disgusting place all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's in shambles.
It's a dirty, gross place.
Outside of the houses, it's a terrible.
Just
the
covered in
conditions
ash.
are
Covered in
abhorrent.
ash. I guess he does talk about the ash part.
Yeah, I actually think he does a pretty good job reminding you of like how decrepit
God, it's gross out there.
This society is. And
Gross.
you know, the other thing I observed, one of the observation I made about how he starts this book, because if you remember kind of how we ended the last podcast, we knew that it wasn't going to be easy for Elend to just simply take control. And we figured Straff was going to come back. I don't think we thought of the extent of then Set's army and the Koloss and all that crazy stuff. But one thing I liked that he did is there's still major consequences and ripple effects and interesting side effects from toppling the Lord Ruler. And he just didn't smooth over it. There's a lot of dialogue at the beginning where he talks about the consequences of what they did. Even though it was for the greater good, he says things like, and this is a quote early on, he says, Elend's new world still had urchins. Paying the ska probably made for a better street life. More pockets to pick, more hands to feed beggars. I just thought that was interesting, like these political ripple effects that lend credibility to the storyline in my mind. Like, it's like, okay, you got it. Not only are you dealing with all of these main conflicts, but also the reality of this new system that's been created.
You're running a kingdom.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And Vin actually talks about it too later on, where she's like, when you've sort of given equal access, when you're feeding these people, like now they just have, you know, without the Lord Ruler, there's just more pockets to pick now. I just thought that was so interesting.
Totally.
This thieving is still happening. It's just a different environment now. One that's maybe more conducive to their freedoms, but also the freedom to do wrong too.
Yeah. So I think this is actually probably a good point, because this is a huge part in part 3. Is the assembly that Elend has created, right? He's the king, but he has essentially reverted to building a democracy, right? No one man can be in power. There's checks and balances. He's created this assembly with 8 ska, 8 merchants, and 7 noblemen, him being the 8th. And, you know, he talks about that, like, that ends up biting him in the butt. And a big part of the third part is him trying to, he did such an amazing job writing all these laws that it's actually going to cause a lot of friction for him. And you kind of see him realizing, like, wow, was I too smart for this? Did the Lord Ruler have some semblance of a good hold on everybody to where he didn't have to deal with that and he was doing a good job. But then he also has his internal battle where he's like, well, no, we need this. The Lord Ruler maybe did a good job in some areas, but the kingdom was in a bad place. And so I actually love that internal conflict of the assembly and how that comes into the story and how that has helped Elend both lean on his principles, but also become more of a king and be more direct and more confident.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the things I mentioned too, is in the last podcast, I was not excited for Elend's character progression because I just wasn't bought into him as a leader, him as someone that could be a king. And I actually do have a point where in my notes, and I'll get to it in a little bit probably.
Just to clarify, Trevor has a 2 or 3 pages of a notebook of notes over there.
Yeah, I wasn't able to keep all of them in here. I was at the hotel one night, and I'd forgotten my notebook, and so I was reading.
That looks like a wide ruled. That's not college ruled. That's wide ruled.
This is wide ruled.
Oh my God!
I've got a spot that happened in part 3 where I actually clicked with Elend.
Yeah.
So Sanderson did it within the first 3 parts. I think I even said like that's going to be Sanderson's toughest objective is to get the reader, me, to buy into Elend. And at one point, somehow, this goofy guy did it for me. He was able to kind of capture this, this academic, this kind of purist, this idealist. And the way that I think he did it, honestly, was partially because he introduced Tindwyl, who I think did such a wonderful job coaching him. And because I already had so much respect for Terraceman, and anyways, and you have a lot of respect for Tindwyl based on her background and the breeding program she was forced through, and just how much of a survivor she is and how capable and confident. And also, she's a keeper of like governments. So she knows all the best rulers and she's sort of teaching him, and she has faith in him. And so that also helped me have, agree with her. So if he hadn't have introduced a character like her, I don't know that I would have come around as much as I did to Elend. Yeah. But because she ended up believing in Elend, it did help me too. And it all catapulted really nicely, I thought, at one point where Elend does try to essentially outwit the assembly. And it ends up all falling in his face, right? Because Lord Penrod ends up becoming the king. Yes. But I thought that was so cool that Elend finally tried to fight back there.
Did you... So it was a very Princess Bride moment. Or not Princess Bride.
As you wish.
No, I'm thinking of Princess Diaries. You ever seen Princess Diaries with Anne Hathaway?
Yeah, of course.
Where she's just like the ugly duckling, and then the guy spins her around, and she's like super hot and the princess. When Tindwyl first comes in and puts him in the white uniform and the cape and the dueling cane, and she's like, "You got to cut your hair," and he's like, "I'm not cutting my hair." And then he finally cuts his hair. I pictured this guy so perfectly. Not like a douchey, clean-cut, blonde-haired, white uniform type guy, just an executive presence. And so I'm curious, did that do anything for you, or was that just
fluff
for you?
Because I remember, I'm less visual, it sounds like, in a lot of ways, but it was so hyperbolic to me that it was like, they cut his hair in this militarian way, and then the pure white, garb. That did do something for me. Yeah. That helped me.
I think that was a great way to just cut out some of the dialogue and just be like...
Well, and literally black and white with the ash and then him and the purity of it. And it just, it does make you feel like there's a certain
he's got a commanding Gandalf the White presence now. He went from Gandalf the Gray and disheveled to Gandalf the White.
Yeah, he did.
And now he's just the guy.
Yeah. So the part that I was talking about that I like, this for whatever reason was my aha moment, where I just kind of was like, I agree now that Elend should be king. This is from Vin's perspective. But it says, Penrod nodded, returning to his seat. Almost as soon as he sat, one of the Scots stood. I nominate Lord Penrod. And then Vin says, Elend had to expect that, Vin thought. After nominating Penrod to be Chancellor, why give such authority to the man that he knew would be his greatest contender for the throne? The answer was simple. Because Elend knew that Lord Penrod was the best choice for Chancellor. Sometimes he's a little too honorable. I just loved that idea of like, that's his way of fighting is by sticking to his constitution.
Sticking to his constitution. I love that about him.
And being a little too honorable. And I just...
So much he dethrones himself.
And you know what? And that is so Elend, but somehow that in that moment, because it's really easy to be a sellout when the stakes are in your favor, right? Like, we can all be honorable when we're not the one that has huge upside to gain. Because usually, you really know somebody and they'll throw their values away for a quick buck, or they'll like win the deal, or they'll be super hypocritical about somebody else who has a windfall of success doing it the bad way. But put that same person in that situation, they do it.
They've got everything to lose. That's when your true character is shown.
And he had everything to lose, and he was still too honorable. So there's something about that like, I do love unwavering conviction in a lead character.
Yeah.
And I've always, to this point, there just hasn't been that moment, because he already had everything. He was a noble. So it's really easy. When you're a noble,
to kind of hate this guy a little bit.
Well, no, it's when you have everything, it's easy to be super these great virtues,
totally.
Right? And to be to be somebody who's kind of has all these theories and
it's like when a celebrity gets on and is like, promoting a cause online, and you're like, you don't even live in the real world.
You're sitting from the comfort of your home, your luxury,
right.
Your luxury car. But then finally, somebody like him, he gave up being a king, so it was all real. It wasn't just a facade, this purest sort of academic facade where like he's three standard deviations removed from the actual problem.
Yeah.
Here he is, finally testing. Does he choose honor, or does he cave and bend his own rules? And he doesn't. And so that really helped to click that you are the man that Sanderson is trying to write you out to be.
And I did like how, he is a man of principle for sure, but he was kind of wishy-washy on the whole thing, where he kind of hid himself into books. But towards the end, once he's lost the throne, I forget who he's talking to, they're like, no, say it out loud that you want to be king. And he's like, I do not want to lose this. I want to be king. I want to make the world a better place. And that to me was a turning point. Aside from him getting the white uniform, I actually love that part. But for him to like have that confidence and say like, no, I'm not going to lose this, and just, let things play out. That part was impactful for me.
Yeah, agreed. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I just want to acknowledge, I think we should just jump around, because there's so many.
We've already have. So
we gotta kind of like follow where the inspiration strikes, because it's so hard to stay contained. I think what would be cool is just like listing out the amount, like the points of conflict that Sanderson introduced in these parts, and then let's go down any of them that we want. So I'll list them out, and then we can choose to pick one to talk on. But this was one of the main revelations I had revelations was, wow, did you pack in a ton of volume of conflict? And it didn't. It actually at one point it did feel a little bit overwhelming, because I'll read through it.
Part 2 was 150 pages. Parts 1 through 3 were 367.
Yeah.
So
So it was a lot.
In my book, in the hardcover.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a lot. So this was everything he introduced, pretty much, the main stuff. Watcher, Zane, Mist Ghost or Mist Spirit.
Big.
That's big.
Big.
A hidden spy. It's a Kandra. It's another point of conflict. Straff army.
Yeah.
Set army. Koloss army.
Yep.
Elend,
Jastes.
Yeah, Jastes. Elend losing the throne to Lord Penrod. Somebody poisoning the wells. Vin is out of Atium. And they still can't find the Lord Ruler's Atium stash.
Yeah.
So that's 10 things that's happening, and there's no resolution. It's just only rising action.
Well, and let's not forget, Marsh seems to be on this wild goose chase looking for something.
So let's actually go back to that, because I thought that was really, really interesting, because that's how part 2 starts. I believe is basically they're going through, and Sazed finds the text that was etched into the steel of the convecticle.
Well, so he goes to this village, and this guy has gone off the deep end pretty much, and is claiming that the mist like tried to kill him, or something happened, and this villager is like gets hurt or is almost killed by the mist, and he's trying to help them. And Marsh out of nowhere shows up and is like, hey, Sazed, you have to come with me. All of my Inquisitor boys are gone, and it's not far from here, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I want to go check out, and we need to go together.
Isn't that so weird? Because then Marsh is gone and just leaves him in the middle of the night, and Sazed was waiting and waiting and waiting. He even shaved his head. Like,
well, and
they had so much time.
What was interesting is that, so they go to the convecticle of whatever. It's like a week-long journey, and so they get there, and it's deep in this valley, and Sazed's like, look, I've read a bunch of books, and this is quite literally the worst place to have a stronghold of all time, because siege weapons could come in and just absolutely take this thing down. They rappel down, they go in, nobody's there. And Sanderson he talks a lot about how all of the walls are essentially just stainless steel.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, stainless steel.
They're blind.
And Sazed...
They can only see through the metal. Remember how they tell you how...
Well, Marsh can see in the dark and the light.
Yeah, well, it makes sense that it's all steel with slight ripples, because they tell you how they see in the first book, remember?
Yes.
They can, through their steel
spikes.
Eyes... Through their spikes, they can sense metal in other people's body and metal around them. And it creates blue lines everywhere.
Correct.
So I almost imagine like night vision goggles, kind of.
Well, and Sazed actually brings this up, because right when they go into the convecticle, it's pitch black, and Sazed goes, "Yo, Marsh, I can't see in there."
Yeah.
And so Marsh goes and gets him a torch, and he's like, "Oh, this is something I should note, that Marsh can see totally fine in the dark."
Marsh chooses not to tell anybody, and in the annotations, Sanderson does highlight that. That's significant, and I don't know why, but the fact that he can see and doesn't share it ends up being something. And I don't know.
I'm sure of that.
I didn't pick up on that when I was reading it. That was something in the annotation where I was like,
I love the time that they spend at the convecticle, because it is so brief and so important to the Inquisitors that are, prior to the Lord Ruler, were the Steel Ministry. I mean, they were the guys.
Yeah.
And so one of my favorite parts, actually, of part 2 is when they're walking through the convecticle, and Marsh gets this feeling, and he goes, "Hey, I'm getting this feeling right now that something is going on here. We've walked down this hallway, and there's a bunch of dead ska here, and it smells horrible. I know that I need to go search this place, but something tells me that you cannot be with me. I don't care if you walk around and see all the atrocities, but something tells me that you cannot be with me," which is what, I think we'll talk about this later about predictions, makes me feel that Marsh is not necessarily like becoming a bad Inquisitor, but he's starting to sympathize with them and being like, look, I can't let you see all of these secrets. I don't care what you see.
Yeah, and Sazed actually mentions that in part 1, where he is worried about Marsh's allegiance to the team, effectively, because he refers to the Inquisitors as my brethren.
Yeah, his brethren.
And so here's my thing. Why did Marsh even bring Sazed there at all? What motive was it? And that just makes no sense unless you're setting him up for something. Did Marsh has this feeling and then leaves and then suspiciously shepherds him to the very room where he sees this writing sketched in the wall that happens to be Quan?
Yeah.
And I think those are the epigraphs.
Yeah.
Every chapter is what's in that convecticle etched in steel.
Yes.
But seems
and
suspicious.
then he's like, yo, we got to get out of here. Like,
and then
I'm not getting a good feeling.
And then they get out, and then he abandons Sazed.
So
what did he want Sazed to see? And was he fishing for something or trying to lead Sazed to something?
And I think this is a good point, and I don't want to jump to some of my predictions, but
hey,
personally,
let it fly.
I feel that due to Sanderson's themes of consequences, of every metal that you burn, Marsh was originally supposed to lead the Sky Rebellion, which he did. He failed. Kelsier picked up where he left off, became the savior, and I personally feel that Marsh is going to become bad. And whether this was a red herring, him bringing Sazed along, I think that was maybe making the readers feel like maybe Marsh isn't bad because he's bringing Sazed. But I personally think that Marsh is going to be bad.
Mm-hmm. Why did the Steel Inquisitors abandon the convecticle? Right? And also, what did they know that we don't? What are they running from? Why did they have Quan's final words, and
in a hidden room,
in this hidden room, etched in the stone or etched in the steel. There is definitely a connection between the Steel Ministry and the Terrace prophecy.
And I love that Quan writes that. Oh yeah,
like,
yes, without a doubt.
Is that just basically like maybe Alendi made the Steel Inquisitors or something? But that wouldn't make sense because Rashek ends up ruling over them. But how did they get so intertwined with that Terrace prophecy with Quan?
Well, the Inquisitors, were they created by the Lord Ruler? I don't think so.
Well, I think so. Somehow they are gifted allomancy and these abilities through this process. I was wondering if maybe that's something they picked up from the Well of Ascension, or
I thought maybe I had something here.
So yeah, I don't know if they talk. They're pretty suspicious, and they leave some mystery around how.
I wrote this down. So Quan in Sazed's rubbing. If only the Terrace religion and the belief and the anticipation hadn't spread beyond our people. If only the deepness hadn't come, providing a threat that drove men to desperation in both action and belief. So what he's almost talking about here is that the Terrace religion and the anticipation is what created the deepness.
Well, the anticipation essentially was all their prophecies of the Hero of Ages.
Of the Hero of Ages. But what he's saying is, if only the deepness hadn't come. Okay, so maybe, I don't know where I'm going with this.
They also call them world bringers too, which I thought was interesting. Like, world bringer. Are you somehow like? What are they bringing? Like, are they bringing something from? What are they trying to disseminate? Where was the spawn of, where did these prophecies even come from?
It's almost like the Terrace are the OG.
And that's
the original
the only
people.
religion that's gone and wiped out. Mm-hmm. That's the one religion that has been completely wiped.
So maybe the Inquisitors were originally Terracemen. And
that could make sense.
And the Terracemen, so that was the original one that wiped them out. Lord Ruler said, hey, I'm going to keep 12 of you guys. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make you Steel Inquisitors. I'm going to, you have everything. You have
Ferrokimi, you've got allomancy, powers.
Everything. You have everything. You know everything. Control. You have everything. You guys are going to be my bitches.
It seems really interesting to me. One of the other... Oh, this was just like an interesting side question because I don't have too much more to say about the Steel Inquisitors. Sure. That's a big question mark, though. I'm excited to learn more about that. But remember how... So another point of conflict we can move on to is the spy. Mm-hmm. And we know it's a Kandra, but so Vin is kind of going through this meticulous process of trying to uncover who is the Kandra, and her method is Oreseur is slowly leaking out information that's kind of forbidden
because she's starting to ask better questions. That's why I think she's going to take better. She's asking better questions,
and also Oreseur must be capable of emotions because he is definitely coming around to Vin. But one of the methods is so. He tells Vin that Kandras cannot replicate allomancy. Mm-hmm. And so her thought is, okay, it can't, if it's ham, then I'll be able to find out pretty quickly. Correct. If it's breeze, I'll be able to find out quickly. But I was wondering, can Kandras also know the past memories of the bodies they replicate? Because in my mind, that'd be a really easy way to uncover the hidden Kandra. And I know that like Kandra follow the people that they're, they learn to mimic them perfectly and all these things, but she goes pretty far back with a lot of these people. Couldn't you just ask them something that they couldn't, years and years ago?
There's an entire page here where she thinks that Doxin might be the Kandra, and she's like, "Hey, we had this conversation the last book, in case you recall, and you were telling me about your family, and Doxin, references a lot of very specific things from the conversation." And she just kind of writes it off. She's like, well, she asks a Kandra, like, would a Kandra know these things? And Oreseur does not. He's like, we're very good at interviewing people before we take over their bodies.
Yeah, but that seems unlikely.
Okay,
for me.
But also, it was so breezed over so quickly that who else like something's got to be a twist on this Kandra, and this is something about Sanderson that I've learned is that like it's got to be kind of obvious, but he kind of breezes over it. Like who else could it be? He just breezed over Doxson so quickly.
You think it's Doxson? There's only so many people it could be.
I mean, I liked where they were going with General whatever. What was his name? What's his name?
Demoux?
No, that was the
Captain
other
Demoux?
Kandra. Wasn't Lord Renew and Captain Demoux.
Well, Captain Demoux,
Is who we thought was the Kandra.
I don't know that I was sure who the Kandra was, actually.
Well, because Vin
Vin thought it was.
Vin
yes. Turns out he is he's kind of the one that's preaching the Church of the Survivor.
Right.
And so I thought that was an interesting twist. And something that I didn't expect was, and she brings it up, she actually brings this up towards the end, is how did Demoux get that information? There's a whole paragraph.
About what?
He's spouting prophecy. So there's a part in here where Ven says, but where did Demoux get the promises that, or I forget who it was that said this, but where did Demoux get the promises that Ven would stop the ash and bring back the sun? How did he know of green grasses and blue skies, describing the world as it was described only in some of the world's most obscure texts?
Yeah.
He knows an awful lot, and I'm wondering... So anyways, they assume it's not him because he's doing this.
But again, another thing that was just breezed over, like, oh, it's not him.
Well, that's one of those like questions, though, too, that like she leaves you with, and it's like, yeah, where did he get this information?
Yeah.
Is it from Kelsier? Like, I think that like, did Kel have some access to this Terrace prophecy, and they just can't let Ben know it? You can't let the person, because maybe that was the whole problem with Elendi, is like
they told him that you're the hero of ages.
Too much, like so maybe part of it is they can't know, and it has to happen organically, kind of. And so I'm wondering, is there like this? Do people know about this? And maybe Kel only told certain folks, or like, how did Demoux actually get this? What page are you looking for? That was 448.
Yeah, no, I'm looking for is this part 4? It's part 3. Oh, if I can find it. Part 4.
What?
Okay.
What were you trying to find?
There's the closing epigraph of part 3 is where Quan is like, I think that I talked Elendi into this. Could it be that Elendi saw the signs too? Could it be that Elendi fit the signs too well? Could this mean? And then I wrote, could this mean that Vin isn't the hero of ages?
Yes,
because it fit it too well. Because she has this internal conflict where she's starting to think herself that she's a hero of ages. But the first epigraph of part 4 says, and I didn't read past this, it just says, I know your argument.
Yeah.
Where he almost knows that if you're reading the epigraphs, that maybe we're catching on to that Vin, okay, maybe Vin isn't the hero of ages, and he just starts part 4, he's like, I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
It's still probably Vin.
It's got to be Vin. I do want to bring up like an interesting sidebar. This is something I've been noodling on.
Noodling?
I've been noodling on it.
I love that.
So in the back, if you read the allomantic chart, it talks about...
Which I have not done.
So it talks about an unknown metal.
Oh, can I read it now?
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet.
Unknown metal. It just says unknown. And then it says...
see into your own future.
You can see into your own future. And then from a ferrochemical side, it says unknown.
So can we... Is there on here atium?
Yeah, of course.
Where does it say the opposite of atium is?
Atium, palladium, right here.
See into other people's... Okay, all right. So atium you can see into other people's future.
Slightly.
And your own and other people's past.
Palladium slightly, yeah.
So then gold is you see...
Into your own past. The unknown metal is to see into your own
other
future.
People's future. Okay.
So what I'm saying is we are going to find this unknown metal. And we know, and it says question mark, we assume that if gold allows you to see into your own past, that this unknown metal can let you see into your own future. So how could seeing into your own future potentially...
Others people's future.
No, your own future. It lets you see into your own future. Atium lets you see into other people's future.
Your own future.
Your own
Okay.
future.
Yeah.
So that could make
Ooh.
sense how Elend could match it too perfectly if he could see into his own future. So I'm trying to think through situations where you could see.
Because that's obviously got to be a massive part of the book.
The unknown metal has to be. And there's parts in here where they kind of do allude to the unknown metal. But yeah, I was just curious if you had any thoughts about what could if they were to stumble across this metal that does allow you to see into your own future, how might that impact the plot of the book? And who might use it?
Well, we did talk at the end of Mistborn that we think that there's a world that Elend could become Mistborn, that he might snap, where I could see, somehow Elend burns that metal and sees like what the future could look like, and he's like, "Yo, I'm not it. I'm not the guy. I'm not that guy." I'd like to see that. I could also see. I don't really know, but I'm betting the house on Sazed leading Vin to the Well of Ascension.
Yeah.
Something happens, and Marsh gets killed there.
That'd be cool.
There's got to be some final standoff between Sazed, Vin, and Marsh at the Well of Ascension. I'm betting the house on that.
Let's do it. I'm in agreement. I think that's a cool one. Here's an interesting theory. So, and this involves the unknown metal. This happens in part 3. There's a quote that says, "That night, somehow she drawn the mists into herself, burning them as if they were a metal."
Oh.
And so my thought is, and then the other thought is, you know how, so is the unknown metal in the mist somehow? And something I was thinking about is, you know how the mist ghosts, she could sense that they were using allomancy and these allomantic pulses and thumps. What if
Which is what drew Elend to the Well of Ascension.
What if the mist ghost is the future version of herself? And
oh, that's nice.
And the Well of Ascension somehow is producing this metal from the earth or from something.
Yeah.
And the mist is transporting it. And then she, as a very gifted allomancer, is able to burn it. And she is somehow seeing, maybe her future self is this mist ghost. So that was the thing I told you, like, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I do think that'd be really interesting.
Well, that is interesting and something that...
you like that?
Yes, I do. And something that Vin has not told anybody is when the mist ghost touches her and her arm just goes cold. And she just falls out of the building, also, and Oreseur's like, "Yo, what's wrong with you?"
Yeah. What was the mist ghost potentially saving her from? Or like
saving her or trying to tell her? Or
there's a quote in one of the epigraphs where they talk about how the mist ghost to Elend tried to kill somebody. Remember that? They had a knife or something.
Yes.
And so Vin suspects that the mist ghost could have malintent. But I don't know. Maybe the future version of himself was recognizing that Elend was not the hero of ages, or like, I forget who he was trying to knife, the mist ghost, remember, in the epigraph, but it would make sense if they were trying to knife
and that's
Rashek.
I think that is got to be a crucial part, because when you think about how part 3 ends up, is Vin has almost convinced Sazed that the mist is the deepness.
Yeah.
And they keep referencing the sun, that like the mist almost blots out the sun when the mist come during the day, crops die and whatever. That that's a big piece, but now Sazed is now on this trail thinking that the mist is the deepness, and how do we...
So does Vin. And Vin thinks... Well, Vin sort of convinces Sazed that...
And then Sazed is now convincing Tindwyl on it.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Hey, ask me to stay."
Yeah,
they hold hands.
Yeah,
and Sazed's like, "I have a unique right now."
Yeah, they just want to... she just wants love.
They just want to hold hands.
But, yeah, I think that's so the mist, I think, it would make sense if it's the deepness. I know that we kind of had like hinted at that. That was kind of one of the things we hinted at in the first, the very first 2 parts of book 1, is that there was something about the mist.
So I want to touch back on one of the conflict points that you talked about is the poisoning of the wells.
What is going on with that?
So if you recall, when Sazed goes to that small village and he sees all of those people in the house, they're all terrified because they think the mists are starting to kill people. They don't want to leave the house, whatever.
Yeah.
But he sets the scene. When he walks outside, there is a well in the middle of that village that who's to say that wasn't starting to poison people and whatnot. That I thought that connection between the Luthadel well and this well have to be connected, and that's got to do something with the Ashmounts, the volcanoes spitting out coal.
So you don't think someone is poisoning the well?
I don't think someone's poisoning the well. I think it has to do with the Ashmounts getting in the groundwater. I'm getting more geological here, but...
Well, that would be interesting, because I know that Breeze poisoned the well, Set's well, and that was why he had to leave. They thought it was, it was, he was caught with Allrianne, but that wasn't really what made Set mad.
I don't think that this
well
poisoning has to do with Set or Straff. I think this has to do with the Ashmounts or the deepness or whatever, because that village was essentially all dead in the mist.
Also, we didn't get resolution on that in part 3.
You don't get any resolution on any of that. Sazed's gone.
So we're probably not going to find out who poisoned those wells.
No, I don't think so. I think that's going to be probably a big part of the end of the book.
So you think the ecological side of this will be more present in book 3?
Ecological, I mean, I'm using, modern, non-fantasy logic here, but I'm thinking these Ashmounts...
You love
the
Ashmounts.
Because they are such a big... They're on the map. They shoot out the ash.
They're a strange anomaly.
And nobody has ever referenced the Ashmounts once.
No, never.
In these 2 books. And to think that they're not a massive part of this would be silly overlooked.
I know. I'm glad you keep bringing that up. Speaking of other conflicts, one of the questions I had for you was about... Do you want to show me something about the Ashmount?
No. You keep going. I'm trying to look something up.
Well,
do you know when... I'm sorry. Do you know what chapter... actually, you didn't do it by chapter. I'm trying to figure out when Sazed meets the Koloss army.
Oh, well, you're going way too far. I think the end of part 3 is around 389. That's the beginning of part 4. Okay. I do have some quotes in here about the... you call them Koloss?
Yeah, I call them Koloss.
Yeah, I've got some quotes in here about those bad boys. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you is actually about Atium.
Okay.
And so one of the conflicts that happen is Vin is out of Atium, and it keeps reminding you that makes Vin quite vulnerable.
Very vulnerable.
And because there could be other, Mistborn that take advantage of her burning Atium, and that she'd be done for. And so she is working with this metallurgist who helps find this blend called Duralumin?
Duralumin. Duralumin is what I think we said.
And that metal is awesome.
Sick.
How great was the final fight scene in the assembly, dude?
Sick.
That
so sick.
Was epic.
Very, very sick.
And that quote, man,
when they say that, she could take down 12, or a thug could take down, 6 thugs could take down a whole army, and she took all 3 of them down.
Gosh, it was so cool. I put here, best fight scene in the series so far, in my opinion, with Ven defending Elend, where they were ambushed by the allomancers at the assembly. One of the quotes was, "The man's head exploded as easily as the eyeball
She
had
headbutted
earlier."
him. She headbutted him.
And exploded his head.
Insane.
That is awesome fight scene. And I just love how petrified that made Elend. It was kind of it's kind of interesting because Vin sort of characterizes Elend as this person that can do no evil, and that also she is very concerned with her image as, this sort of this person who is so physically commanding, and doesn't want to be perceived as dangerous, right? And stuff like that. And so I think that's so interesting that she's so worried about that. And I think Elend actually respects it.
Yes.
Oddly is not emasculated by any of that. I think it, maybe it caught him off guard a little bit, but I definitely don't think it's as big of a character flaw or anything like that as Vin thinks it is. So I just am like, I think that's really interesting that Vin is so concerned about her image, as he knows she's a Mistborn. He knows she kills people, but she, in that scene in particular, was so gruesome. Like, she thinks like, well,
and even Elend's like, whoa, like, I knew that Vin was
that big of a deal
kind of crazy, but like, I had no idea the carnage that she could cause.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Koloss are very, very interesting. I know that I took, I thought that I took some notes on that piece. Why? Is there something in particular? Or
no,
do you just want to talk about the description of them?
No. I'm sorry. I'm trying to track Sazed's route, because I think that there is potentially his route does not make sense to me in some of Sanderson's writing here, so I'm just trying to figure out like where I saw that, and I think I'm very close, but
okay.
Continue.
Well, the description, and we can always circle back and maybe the next part we can, because if you want to call Sanderson out for this,
I kind of want to.
I think that you need to then have a very thorough
investigation. Yeah.
I'd hate for you to make such a claim.
It's possible that I looked at the wrong Ashmount, but I don't think that I did.
So I'll let you figure that out. But so Sazed finds Koloss and the army outside of Luthadel and it gives a great description on page 217 and an even better description on page 218.
Okay.
Or there's what I have in my notes if you want to find a juicy description.
218.
I thought they gave
I'm
a
on
very...
page 217.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, so 218 I should have some brackets around what they looked like.
It was completely bald. The oddest feature was its blue skin, which hung loose and folded. The creature looked like a fat man might, but had all his fat been drained away, leaving the stretched skin behind. And the skin didn't seem to be connected very well. Around the creature's red, blood-drop eyes, the skin sagged, revealing the facial muscles. The same was true around the mouth. The skin sagged a few inches below the chin, the lower teeth and jaw completely exposed.
Yikes.
Disgusting.
That's brutal.
Disgusting, dude. You know, it's like the opposite when, when somebody let's use David Goggins. Mm-hmm. He was wildly obese. Or Fat Bastard. We could use Fat Bastard as an example. Wildly obese.
Yeah.
Where he lost a ton of weight and had a bunch of extra skin. Absolutely disgusting to look at in the movie. But this is talking about the opposite, where they were very thin and totally outgrew it, 10 feet tall.
And they
so much that their eye sockets were expanding or not expanding.
So even though I'm not super visual, sometimes when I'm reading, it's just something I'm trying to work on. Obviously, that's powerful imagery and really forced my perspective and my hand on, imagining these creatures. I thought that was interesting. It also talks in the annotations that Sanderson originally in Mistborn Prime included a huge section on the Koloss, and then realized later on when writing the Final Empire and figuring out the best parts of Prime that he felt like it would take away from the heist plot making and things like that, and that would be a distraction. And I kind of disagree. I actually would have liked maybe, and I think it would have added an interesting element. I mean, granted, it might be really hard for him to geographically put us in a situation with the Koloss. It'd be a much longer book if he did that. But I am happy now that he's talking about them. I'm so concerned about, so I want homework. I want you to figure this out, and on the next.
I looked at the wrong Ashmount.
Oh no, you didn't. Hey, at least that you are willing to hand up accountability.
It said 11 and 12. I did 11 and 13, so 13 is farther. So anyway,
he was right.
I'm wrong. He's obviously right.
The guy's a genius.
He's obviously right. He wrote he drew the map.
Another issue, actually, his buddy, one of the guys who's in his alpha group, does it for him.
Yeah, well,
that
guy's. Maybe I'll get a Luthadel tattoo.
That'd be sweet, dude. An Ashmount, right?
That'd be sick. Right on my.
Okay. The other thing I was going to talk about is Straff, because that guy is a savage.
God.
What is that guy's deal?
I mean, without a doubt, he is Tyrion Lannister. And I know you haven't watched Game of Thrones or read the books, but he is Tyrion Lannister. He is just unrelenting, will rule the kingdom, and is just that guy. But when they're negotiating and Elend gets this stroke of confidence and is like, I will literally kill you.
Yeah.
And luckily Vin was out there and kind of took a hint.
Well, with the Duralumin, and she spiked
him, and the guy almost fainted. Yeah. And he's like, oh, wow, she's very powerful.
Yeah.
And this is why I think that the Zane and Vin relationship is so important. I know we haven't even really talked about them, but Zane, towards the end of part 3, Vin is having this very serious internal conflict that Elend is using her, that she's just a pawn in his game.
Zane's manipulating her.
Zane is totally manipulating her. Granted, he's damaged goods. He cuts himself because he's like, oh, God's telling me to kill my dad.
Well, isn't it interesting that she mistook that for the pits of Hathson?
I did not consider that.
How interesting is that? So
I did not consider that.
I think that she almost had this weird parallel back to Kelsier and that survival mentality and how gifted Zane must be. So I think that's part of the.
She's relating to Zane, who is, in a world where you've only known one other Mistborn that you didn't kill.
Yeah.
And now this guy wants to duel with you, but not kill you. And he's now
very
giving you similar
confident
advice that Reen was giving her as a brother that she leaned on so heavily.
Yeah.
That.
What's his endgame then with her? Do you think that he's truly psychotic? He is obviously psychotic.
He's obviously psychotic.
But why is he manipulating her against Elend the way that he is?
Well, I think he's trying to make her feel the same way that he feels as a neglected just pawn in Straff's game, where he wants to almost break her down a little bit. Well, yeah. I mean, Straff's go kill her.
Because it would be awfully convenient if she fell in love with Zane and went off into the
I don't think she's going to fall in love with Zane, but similar to my prediction with Elend, I think it would be very coincidental that Zane turns on Straff. I could totally see that. I think Sanderson's maybe even holding my hand to that. But
you think he's going to kill Straff?
I don't know if Zane kills Straff, but I see Zane joining the rebellion, if you will. And I would absolutely love for Elend and Zane to learn that they're brothers. And Zane's like, oh, you're not a bad guy. You're not controlling Vin. Vin's on her own free will. I didn't know I could be on my own free will. My dad is kind of a let's get rid of him.
Yeah. How interesting is it that I think Straff is kind of a badass, because he's
definitely a badass.
He knows that Zane is poisoning him, and to assert dominance, he drinks it.
Yeah, it's sick. He's like, come on, dude. Poison again?
Gulp, 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 gulp.
Again?
And then Zane is just like, what?
You savage.
So I think it's kind of interesting, because he knows the Sons of Mistborn. At any point, Zane could absolutely
destroy
him. And so as a way to continue to kind of showcase, not only is he his father, so let's not pretend he's got daddy issues. He wants to appease to his father, I think, psychologically. There's some weird thing there where he's oddly subservient given his level of capability. At any point, Zane could do whatever he wants, and he chooses to be this because he's twisted under... And he's just as manipulated as he's manipulating Vin, times 1,000.
And that's why I feel that he's trying to make Vin have his same perspective, but that's not going to last. You're not going to turn Vin to your perspective. I think Vin's going to turn Zane, and
you think Vin's
going to turn Zane?
I think Zane's too far gone. Zane
I don't think so,
insane.
man. I don't think so, because he wants to kill his dad.
He wants to kill everybody.
But I will say, when he's walking through the camp, God says, "Kill that guy." Or he's in the tent with his dad. When he's in the tent with his dad, he said, God says, kill that guy. But there's no internal dialogue about God saying, kill her.
Yeah.
Kill Elend.
Yeah.
Zane's had plenty of opportunities to kill Elend.
Plenty.
He sits outside of his window waiting for Vin.
I'm mystified by Zane. I don't really understand quite what Sanderson's trying to get at with him. To our earlier point, I don't think Ven's going to fall for him. Even if Ven did turn him around, what help does that do? Other than if he truly joins the clan and then helps them get to the Well of Ascension or somehow helps in Book 3. Otherwise, what do you even introduce him for?
Yeah.
Other than the cool conflict it creates with Ven. And it does make Ven question the relationship with Elend, which could lead to the breakup we're looking for.
Maybe Zane's the one that kills Marsh while Vin is drinking from the Well of Ascension.
You really want Marsh.
I want Marsh dead, dude. I'm putting the house on that thing, dude.
Yeah.
He's getting too close. He's calling his Inquisitor brother and the brethren. I'm pissed about it.
You know what's so interesting? And now he's gone. We haven't heard anything.
He's gone.
But you're right. I'm grumpy with him too. Another.
Tell me, Wummy.
I did want to ask you about. So back about the Koloss. One of the things I'm wondering is how did the Lord Ruler control the Koloss, and where does that ability come from? Like, how is Jastes actually controlling these beasts? What's going on?
I have no. I would be taking a wild guess.
Yeah, that's
on
all
the spot.
I'm doing. I can give a guess too if you want to start.
Yeah, I would like that. I would like that.
So one of the things I was thinking would be cool, because Jastes is not a powerful man.
No.
He is also young, like Elend. He was a part of this sort of like ragtag crew that was drinking martinis and just building hypotheticals about the world. Yeah, he's just one of us. How is he commanding a 20,000 deep Koloss army out of nowhere?
20,000.
So my thought would be, well, metals can do that. What if somehow he did find out in textbooks or something that the Koloss could be commanded by some sort of metal? Not to say that he needs to be an allomancer. I'm just wondering, like, maybe he has the Atium and then I don't know. How could
Jastes and his boys chastised Elend for just living in books. So I don't see Jastes going and sitting in a library and like learning anything. No. So I'm getting the sense that Jastes must have a tie or something where he was somehow just walked in the Koloss and was like, yo, I'm the guy now, like you listen to me, but like I literally have no idea.
But they're so powerful, so it's got to be
they could stomp on him any time.
Well, what could they be motivated by? We need to learn more about them. It's hard to predict, right? But I was just trying to think, like, yeah, how are you doing this?
Well, that and the Koloss and the Kandra are also connected somehow. Like, they're like distant relatives.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I have this written down in my notes. Kandra and Koloss linked. That's the only thing I wrote down.
Yeah, we're gonna have to
there is a part in part 3, because these are my part 3 notes, that Kandra and Koloss are linked. Mm-hmm. That I think they used to cohabitate or something like that.
If that's the case, then maybe they could be more capable than we think.
Well, I did think at one point that Straff, it's mentioned that Straff has a Kandra. Mm-hmm. And we don't know.
We know he has a Kandra.
But we don't know who the Kandra is.
Tensoon was his Kandra. They mention it in the very first book, and they make it a big deal. Remember, Elend meets Tensoon.
Could Tensoon be Jastes? If they're linked, then that would be how they could control them, because they are.
So I would need to learn more about that
motives
link
or something.
Yeah, maybe somehow there's some sort of bipartisan nature to how the Kandra and the Koloss operate, because
I'd have to go back and figure out
they're both
where
subjugated and they have a history together. I don't know. That would be interesting. I hadn't thought about Jastes being a Kandra. Dude, I love thinking about everybody as a Kandra.
Oh, that's great. Dude. Everybody's a double agent.
I love thinking about that.
Everybody's a mole.
God. Another thing I was thinking about with allomancy, why can't you use allomancy on yourself?
Well, what would you do?
If I'm nervous, soothe my own nerves. If I, I just feel like there could be a lot of situations where you could...
if you're a Mistborn, like...
You can do everything on other people.
Yeah, but I don't think... You have so much confidence.
I don't know. Vin is constantly in self-doubt. Vin is constantly like...
Yeah, but if you're in self-doubt, I mean, I guess, yeah, maybe you could sue
all
yourself.
of. Oh yeah, you could do everything.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. That's interesting.
But then again, I just was thinking about that. It's like, maybe Sanderson couldn't do that though because he has to make relatable characters in these
Some
books.
people take a Xanax. Some people burn.
That's a good point
burn
too.
brass.
Yeah,
and be like, dog, you gotta relax.
Yeah, or they could riot their emotions. Like, let's say that you need to get angry at something that you're not.
Yeah,
like, you could do that. Like, there's infinite ways that you could use it on yourself, but they can only do it on others. So I'm thinking the only reason Sanderson didn't do that is because then you could literally be the perfect person.
Yeah.
That's not super readable or super fun. One of the things I was going to mention about, and I don't think this is the link necessarily, but Kandras have a religion, and I thought that was really interesting that Oreseur mentions that. And it said here that on page 393, it talks about the Kandra religion. Do you remember that? And I thought that was crazy.
I remember him talking to Vin about it.
So they are very complex creatures, right? And one of the things that they talk about is it says, yeah, the Kandra have a religion, don't they? Vin guessed. Oreseur turned sharply. That was enough of a confirmation. Do the keepers know of it? Vin asked. Oreseur stood on his hind legs, paused against the windowsill. I should not have spoken. You needn't be afraid, Vin. Vin said. I won't give away your secret. But I don't see why it has to be a secret anyways. And then he goes through, basically, the stories say, okay, so it says here, we honor our contract, even in religion. The stories say that you'll kill yourselves off. You're of ruin, after all, while the Kandra are of preservation. You're supposed to destroy the world, I believe, using the Koloss as your pawns. The Kandra tend to think well of the Koloss, Mistress, Oreseur said. There is a bond between us. We both understand what it is to be slaves. We are both outsiders to the culture of the Final Empire. We both... He broke off, and then it goes off.
So that must be where I wrote that they were linked.
Yeah,
that
so
they
I did.
the same...
I did find it. That is interesting. So and they capitalize this point where it says, the stories say that you'll kill yourselves off. You're of ruin with a capital R, after all, while the Kandra are of preservation, capital P. You're ... supposed to destroy the world. Does he know about the terrorist prophecy? Like, are we our own worst enemy type of thing where it's like...
Is that Sanderson getting philosophical and talking about the human condition?
I think so, yeah.
I think
he's hinting at that, and it says here, using the Koloss as your pawn. So he's speaking to something that hasn't happened. And this is... It's saying ruin with a capital R, preservation with a capital T. Think of anticipation with a capital A.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is a part of it.
Stages of the prophecy or whatever.
Part of their contract and their religion is not to speak of it. But maybe they're supposed to...
Well, he's almost alluding that the Koloss are under a contract. So back to the Jastes thing, somehow Jastes...
Could make sense.
...has the contract. Maybe that's what made his house, powerful, that they had the Koloss contract or knew somebody or whatever.
Totally. So that's interesting. So I'm glad that we had that resolution because you brought up a good point. We found it. We talked about it. If Kandra have a religion, maybe the Koloss have a religion. Complex social structures beyond their contract, things like that, making it very possible that Oreseur is able to form a human-like connection with Vin that usurps the contract, and he ends up, being able to do much more for her on his own terms. Maybe that's something that could happen.
I don't think we get any insight on how the contract is formed.
No idea.
Is it a paper pushing thing? Is it a blood contract? Because that gives me a question mark on, okay, so say the Koloss are also contract individuals or
who do they
armies,
report to?
How does one get that? Did Jastes sell his soul to the deepness?
Like how do you even get the contract?
How do you get the contract, right? How did Kelsier get the contract with the Kandra?
I would think it all comes from the Lord Ruler because they talk about that earlier in a couple pages before this. What I read, it talks about that the Kandra came from the Lord Ruler. So I would suspect he did the Koloss too somehow.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. With when he took whatever he took from the Well of Ascension, rather than using it to defeat the deepness, he kept it, I believe, is the issue. And he used some of it for his own bidding, which I believe could have included the Kandra, which could have included the Koloss. So I don't know where the contract stemmed from. I don't know how you get them. It seems like it would need to come from nobility, because only nobles really have Kandra to begin with. The Ska don't even know they exist. This is only a thing known in very private, high up circles.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and so, it wouldn't be murdering Ska because that's commonplace.
Yeah.
Maybe it's you gotta get rid of your firstborn son or something crazy, but then how did Kelsier get it?
Yeah.
Kelsier didn't, he lost his wife.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to go through extreme hardship or align with the Kandra's religion or something.
There's a lot of
but
secrets
that's a big
about
question
Kelsier
mark
that we don't know.
We don't know how this
got that
contract came about.
There's a lot that we don't know about Kel, man. I think there's a lot that he was keeping. And I think the Kandra know a lot. The Kandra obviously know a lot about the terrorist prophecies and the before the anticipation.
Some would argue that the Kandra know more than Sazed does. Sazed does.
Absolutely. And they can't tell anybody, and that's part of their contract as dictated by the Lord Ruler. I would have thought when the Lord Ruler died, their contract would be null and void, but it's not. So there must be some other pressure. Speaking of like a controlling body, I thought it was interesting that the terrorist people report to something called the Synod.
Yeah.
Who are they? And also, with the Lord Ruler gone, and I know that there's other kingdoms and dominances that have similar Lord Rulers. In fact, they make a comment like there's hundreds of quote-unquote Lord Rulers and hundreds of different municipalities, dominances, whatever. Nothing like the Rashek, though. Obviously, he was godlike. But why are the Synod continuing to oppress these terrorist people? Like, where are all of they? Why aren't they helping?
Well, and Tindwyl talks about that at the end of part 3, where she's like, look, you came with, ideas, and you didn't hear their rebuttals, and that's why they got so mad at you.
Yeah.
And then you came and followed through on your thoughts, defeated the Lord Ruler, and freed all of us. Yeah. And you're still being ostracized. Like, you should be leading.
That doesn't make sense.
You should be leading the Synod, not be afraid of them or be ostracized.
So what is their vendetta? Because that's a pretty petty reason to not, I guess they don't have any reason to come save the day for Elend and the kingdom. That they don't really have a dog in that fight, except for Sazed's there, and Sazed, saved all of everybody. Saved everybody in the terrorist religion. So they do owe him a debt here, you would think, and maybe Sazed.
Because ultimately, Vin killed the Lord Ruler, but she was down and out. Sazed is the reason that there is book 2 and 3.
Yeah, he supported Vin, like he's a part of that.
He broke her out of jail.
Supposedly, if I don't know how many terrorist people there are, but he could recruit them as an army and use that to defeat Set and Straff.
That would go against my prediction.
Why?
Because I think Sazed's going to...
Oh, you think Sazed's going to help her to the well?
And I think it's going to be a final battle.
I really hope not, but I do think that'd be an interesting twist. I want to ask... so the last thing I want to talk about is your boy Breeze.
My boy Breeze.
Because one of the things that we had discussed in the last podcast was who we thought was going to get more screen time, and who we wanted to learn more about. And I actually thought we did get a lot of Breeze time for the most part.
We did.
Given the amount of conflict he introduced and so much is going on, the fact that we got a few chapters and even pages with Breeze was nice. I want to read something that I thought was interesting. And it really peeled back Breeze's soft side.
Before you say this, is it when he's in the booth with clubs?
No.
Okay.
This is him talking to Ham. So it says here, Ham frowned. Breeze, someday you're going to have to learn to think about other people. As long as I can think about them from a distance, Hammond, I shall be happy to engage in the activity. Ham shook his head. You're hopeless. Are you heading back to the palace then, Elend asked. Yes, actually, Bree said, checking his pocket watch. Do you need a ride? I brought my own carriage, Bree said. Elend nodded, then turned to Ham, and the two retreated the way they had come, talking about Elend's next meeting with the assemblyman. I'm going to read the next paragraph. So they just said, you're going to have to learn to think about other people, and he just kind of plays along with it. Breeze wandered into the palace a short time later. He nodded to the door guards, soothing away their mental fatigue. They perked up in response, watching the mists with renewed vigilance. With renewed vigilance. It wouldn't last long, but little touches like that were second nature to Breeze. It was getting late, and few people were in the hallways. He made his way through the kitchens, nudging the maids to make them more chatty. It would make their cleaning pass more quickly. And it goes through, and him continuing to do all of this, not even thinking about... So he's only thinking about other people. So I just thought that was so interesting that he plays in this persona as he's this sort of, this sort of like super pretentious, self-involved person that never thinks about anybody. But frankly, he is keeping everybody together and only thinking about other people.
I think maybe a page later or a chapter later, he's talking about Elend, that he cannot, whether it's an internal conflict or he's talking to somebody, he goes, it is impossible to have a connection with somebody because I see them as objects. I go through life telling people what to feel, and so I don't see them as people.
Well,
I see them as parts of the game to soothe them up and down.
I don't know. I think he does genuinely care about people. I don't think
I'm not saying he doesn't care about people, but there is a part of the book where he talks about how he doesn't view people as people.
Maybe, but I mean, dude, why would he? He has nothing to gain from soothing away the guards' mental fatigue or making the maids more chatty.
But he doesn't have anything to gain. But he says I will have to audit this, and we'll talk about it in the next podcast. But like, it goes into his character where he's like, it's impossible for me to have connection because I see them as pawns.
Page 440. I don't believe they use the word pawns, but
not pawns, but
because that means you're treating them like
very
objects.
Objective. That's very.
I don't think he treats people as pawns, because also if you're moving a pawn, you have a greater strategy.
You have something to gain.
He's not trying to do that, but he does. This is a quote that I believe you're referring to. He says. He liked to think it wasn't invasive, referring to allomancy. Yet how could he trust anyone who said they loved him? Was it he or his allomancy that they responded to?
Sure.
So I believe that's kind of what you're hinting at here.
Yes.
Is he doesn't actually know what anybody truly thinks about him.
That is what I'm talking to.
And he doesn't actually feel loved, and he doesn't really know who he is, because he has spent so much time almost subconsciously or even unconsciously manipulating the world around him.
Correct.
And so I think that is very true. And so in a lot of ways, he is quite lost and he's quite lonely. And it does make sense why, like, he's unmarried, and that he would kind of date this fling of a girl that's much younger.
Floozy, if you will.
Well, she might see something in her, but she's also has allomancy and can push on emotions too. So it would make sense to me why he would do that with somebody who could do the same thing to him, so that it's at least equal.
And she has been sneaking around. We have not talked about her at all. There was a point when I thought maybe that's who Straff's Kandra was. Yeah. Because they talk about her. They were having a meeting, and she comes down. Her hair's all disheveled, but she must have been listening and not just gotten up. And so we don't. Yeah. She's kind of sneaking around, hanging around, playing dumb, but she's got to be a mole or something.
She very well could be. Well, that's pretty much what I had. I did want to get some ratings.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's give a parts 1 through 3 rating here, and it's on a scale of 1 to 10.
So the things I really liked was I loved the political aspect of this. I loved Elend's coming into his own as king, becoming more confident. I actually really liked Vin starting to think differently about her relationship with Elend. I love that there were 2 armies at the front of Luthadel. I loved the democracy aspect. I didn't think that I was wanting this to be a political thing, but I loved it.
He dealt with it beautifully.
He dealt with it beautifully, and I just loved the story of that I was not expecting. And I'm going to put part 1.
Are you doing parts 1 through 3, or are you rating?
Parts 1 through 3.
Okay.
7/7.
Oh, really? 7/7. That's good. I was going to give it a solid 8. I was gonna give a solid 8. I really liked it. I liked every part. I felt at one point a little bit overwhelmed with how many. When he introduced the Watcher and the Mist Ghost at this around the same time, I got a little bit like overwhelmed by the amount of conflict and just so much was going on. I was like, you're kind of losing me. But then he did a very good job of quickly leveling out and balancing all of these different things, and and making it such that you didn't forget about anything that happened. And I liked the political aspect. I loved Tindwyl's character. He made me appreciate Elend as a character.
Yeah.
I liked all of it, dude. I thought Straff being, the sort of domineering, sort of crazy guy, and then Zane and the mental manipulation he's doing to Vin. There's just so many possibilities.
Yeah.
So yeah. I really, really liked it, and I would say that so far the way this book started was much better than book 1 in my opinion.
Without a doubt.
So I'm giving it a higher rating than I did for both.
Yeah.
So I gave 7 rating, or like my ratings were in the 7s for both parts, the whole book, parts 1 through 2, and then 3 through 5. So that's my rating.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 7.7 because I thought that there was so much that maybe it's the way that we read it, parts 1 through 3, and then the second half.
It's 65% of the book.
65% of the book. That I don't know. Part 2 was so dense that I don't think I would have done it any differently. But I'm not Sanderson.
Yeah,
and he just threw so much at me that I think that's where my 0.3 is coming in. That wouldn't make it an 8.
That's fine. All I know is we've got a Sanderlance coming, and there is all of this conflict needs to be resolved, all of it. So that's crazy that he's going to be able to do that.
Well, I personally think that book 2 is going to end. There's no final attack on Luthadel. I think that the armies, similar to the Hobbit movies, Battle of the Three Armies, the armies are going to attack at the end of the book. Vin's going to be at the Well of Ascension. There's going to be a conflict with Marsh, Sazed, and potentially Zane at the Well of Ascension. The armies attack at the end of book 2. Book 3 opens up with the siege officially happening, and Vin's going to have to save everybody.
It was nice to get a deeper dive with Breeze. We got a little bit of Ham. You had, I think you have I really like how you feel this whole book is going to wrap up. And that he's going to save the army conflict for book 3 in sort of the battle scenes,
or at least that the armies are not going to attack. I think the book 2 is going to end with the armies attacking.
Book 3 will end with them attacking?
No, book 2 is going to end with them attacking, and book 3 is going to open with the attack. And
so we're not going to know how it's resolved.
I don't think
there will be
attack. Yes.
So my thought with how Sanderson likes to do this kind of stuff is, the thing he makes you think is the climax or like the big conflict isn't. And that's for sort of the false summit, similar to what happened in book 1, and when, what happened? It was, Kelsier's army basically left early and, kind of, self-sabotaged.
Self-saboteur.
I don't think we're going to have part of me feels like there's not going to be a fight. Wouldn't that be crazy?
I want there to be a fight.
Like, I do too, but like, I don't know. Part of me feels like an interesting twist. You've got these armies and maybe they attack each other or something happens, but part of me feels like it's going to be somewhat anticlimactic. You're not going to have, I don't think you're going to have like mass loss of ska and stuff like that, and it's going to be complete chaos.
Yeah. I don't think that Sanderson has built up the Luthadel army enough for it to be a book 3 to be a war book.
No.
I don't think that he's done that.
So I think there's going to be some interesting resolution there with this whole craziness, because he starts off in the first chapter introducing the armies and then very quickly then the Koloss. So he's been teasing us that there's going to be this epic battle. I think it would be funny if there is no epic battle at all, and then something else happens with this Well of Ascension thing that then makes everybody have to fight the deepness.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I like that. Bunch of guys just stabbing the mist.
something is going to happen. Everybody's
I got it.
What if everybody just starts croaking from the mist too?
That'd be crazy.
You know, because
COVID.
that was, what if everybody, pandemic, what if everybody, because it does mention that in the book, like some people in that tribe that Sazed had stumbled across, like some people in the town had died and some people hadn't. I was wondering, like, why are some people resilient to this mist and others aren't? You know, and we don't know what's happening because everything outside of Luthadel is not discussed in the book. Sanderson just brings up that one tribe, so ostensibly there's a lot of mist ghost, or there's a lot of, like, people maybe dropping like flies out there that we don't know about, and this hasn't yet hit Luthadel. But I'm curious, like, is that the real army? That's the real threat, is the mist and the deepness and stuff, and then maybe, I don't know. There's probably going to be an army. There's probably going to be a fight. But.
Dude, the Ashmounts. Staking the house on the Ashmounts being a big deal. I think all the Atium, you throw the Atium into the Ashmounts and everything's solved.
I know. You've predicted that since day one. So, well, I think we've got an awesome, kind of deep dive into parts 1 through 3. Could not be more excited to finish this. I think we're going to finish it quick. One of the things that we're going to do, though, as we're finishing parts 3 through 6, is we're going to pod again. And our next pod is going to be about upcoming book series. So Wes and I, I've got 7 books that I want to present to Wes.
I heard 10.
You told me to narrow it down.
I did.
So Wes said that looking at 10 books would be 3
absolutely ridiculous. Are you kidding me?
3 too many. And so instead, I've narrowed it down to my top 7, and it's a mixture of fantasy and sci-fi. And I'm basically just going to bring them and show Wes cover to cover. And some of them he knows, some of them he might not. And then we're just going to kind of Google it, look at Goodreads and stuff.
I'm also bringing my top 7.
No, you're not.
I'm going to bring my top 5.
Are you?
I mean, I can take your top 7.
No.
Should I bring mine too?
Do you have a top 5 that you want to read?
I got a big book, Goodreads.
Okay.
Do you want me to bring mine, or do you want to just go off yours?
I'd like to know yours. How about this? I'm sure that some of the ones I'm going to show you might have overlap.
I have a feeling.
Yeah. So I'll show you my top 7, and then
I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
And then you show me yours. Okay. We'll compare and contrast. And so I think I
like this idea.
That's what we're gonna do, just as a sort of a filler in between, and then obviously we'll review the end of the book.
Yeah, we will.
And we'll talk plot.
We're gonna talk plot, baby. Goblinry.
Yeah, everybody, this has been a fun journey so far. We're gonna keep at it.
Thank you, Trevi.
Yeah, let's like, subscribe. Tell us what you want with this podcast. Give us some feedback. We tried to do the part by part thing. I think that felt a little bit too clunky for us and not organic enough. And so, tell us what you think. Do you like that? We're sporadic and are driven by real time inspiration, and I think that's when we feel best. So
couldn't agree more.
I'm going to vote for that. But if the audience thinks otherwise, please let us know, and we'll take it into consideration. But
we love your comments.
But also, we probably won't go part by part again.
I don't care what you have to say.
All right, baby.
Bye, baby.
Bye, bye.